Hello everyone. We are going to finish up our notes on factoring today, and we're actually going to end where we started. So this was your very first little yellow sheet when we first started factoring. We're going to look back at factoring by grouping again. And because we have been doing so much of this, I'm only going to do two examples today. I'm going to look at A right here, and I'm going to look at C. Okay, so for A, I look across. Remember we said the first step is always look across to find your GCF. Well, this one doesn't have a GCF besides 1, which doesn't do us any good to factor out, so I'm going to skip that step. All right, now this one already has 4 terms, so there's no reason to go back and multiply A and C together. The only reason to do that is because I was trying to create something with 4 terms out of something that only had 3 terms. Well, this one's already got 4 terms, so all I need to do is cut it in half right here. Focus on these two. GCF of those two, well, they both have an x in common. And remember, we always pick the smallest exponent. Well, the smallest exponent besides 2 and 3 is 2. So I'm going to have x squared. Go back and make that lowercase. Oops. All right, let's try that again. Word is giving me troubles. All right, there we go. And once I factor out that x squared, then what I have left, I'm going to subtract my exponents. Remember, when you divide, you subtract your exponents. 3 minus 2 is 1, so I've got x to the first. And 2 minus 2 is 0. So you might be tempted just to close your parentheses right there. But remember, anything raised to the 0 power equals 1. So if I have 2 minus 2 on my exponents there equal to 0, x to the 0 power is the number 1. So I have that in the parentheses. And now I look at these two. Well, the GCF of those two is 1. That's the only number that will divide into both of them. And anything divided by 1 is itself, so that part hasn't changed. Now look, I have x minus 1 in both my parentheses, so that's good. I'm ready to go to the next step. So I'm going to have x minus 1. And then in the second parentheses, I put what's outside. So x squared and then my plus 1. Okay, so this one is linear, this one is good, this one is quadratic. I wish that I could factor this one again. I see that 1, the coefficient right here, is a perfect square number. I see that 1, the constant right here, is a perfect square number. So my mind sort of goes to difference of squares, except that I see that I have a plus right here. And remember we said the sum of squares does not factor in the reals. So even though this particular term is still quadratic, it still has an exponent of 2, I cannot factor it again because the sum of squares does not factor in the reals. So I have factored this one as far as I can. Okay, let's look down here at C. So again, the first step is always your GCF. Well, as I look across at this one, I see that all of my numbers are even. So 2 will divide into all of those. And if I divide, let me turn bold off there. If I divide everything by 2, 4 divided by 2 is 2. X to the third, that part doesn't change. Plus 8 divided by 2 is 4. And again, the x squared part does not change. Plus 6 divided by 2 is 3. And 12 divided by 2 is 6. Okay, so now I have 1, 2, 3, 4 terms in the parentheses, just like before. And again, I don't need to multiply A and C because my whole point in that was to turn it into something with 4 terms. This one already has 4 terms, so I'll just divide it in half. Just like we did in the other videos, that 2 that's on the outside is just going to stay out there. The GCF of these two, well, 2 and 4 are both still even, so 2 will go into both of those. And then I look at my x's, x to the third, x squared. I want to pick the smallest exponent. So x squared right there. And what I have remaining in the parentheses, 3 minus 2 is 1. So I have x to the first. 2 divided by 2 is 1. So I understood 1 right there. You can put it or not put it. 4 divided by 2 is 2. And then x squared minus x squared, again, just like before, that makes x to the 0 power. And anything to the 0 power is 1. 2 times 1 is 2. So I'm finished there with the 2. I don't need an additional x because all of my x's factored out. All right, so I'm going to look at this one, 3x and 6. The greatest common factor there is a 3. Now I'll see what I have left. 3 divided by 3 is 1. I'm going to choose to put the 1 this time just to show you guys that it'll still work out. And 6 divided by 3 is 2. All right, so I'll look in the parentheses, x plus 2 and 1x plus 2. So I have to remember that 1x and x are the same thing. So even though those don't look identical, they still match. So I can do this, and that 2 that's on the outside just stays on the outside. Inside the first parentheses, I'm going to put x plus 2. That's what they have in common right here and right here. And then inside the second parentheses, I'll put what was on the outside, what I factored out. So right here, I'm going to have 2x squared. So 2x squared goes first. And then in the second part, I'm going to put the plus 3 from right here, plus 3. Again, I notice that this one is linear, this one is x to the first power, and this one is quadratic, but it doesn't factor any further. So even though I didn't turn out to have only linear factors, which is what I would like to have, I have factored this one as far as I can. Okay, I added a couple factor by grouping questions onto your Delta Math for today. So there are 7 total Delta Math questions, and you guys can go ahead and get started on those. Let me know if you have questions.